The Bronwyn Bishop helicopter flight, she said that she acted within the rules, although everyone from you down has agreed that it was inappropriate.
An error of judgment.
An error of
judgment.
judgment.
VK Bishop is declared elected.
I wish to express my grateful thanks for the high honour that has been bestowed on me by the House. I give the call to the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of, I trust, the whole House and certainly on behalf of the government, I congratulate you on the high office to which you have been elected. Yes, over the years you have been a very tough politician, but as well as being a very tough politician, you are, as was said earlier in this chamber, someone who understands the rhythms of this House, who understands the importance of this chamber in our democracy and who genuinely wants the best for our country. You understand that if this parliament is at its best, our country will be closer to its best. You understand that all of us are called to be better, and you are determined to ensure that this parliament is a better parliament than the one it replaces. I don't attribute blame, unlike perhaps some, for the difficulties and the frustrations of the last parliament. All of us can do better in this parliament than we did in the last parliament. I am determined to do that. I trust all in this House are determined to do that, and I know, Madam Speaker, that you will hold us to the high standards that you have always set in your own life.
A Speaker must be in love with democracy. They must be in love with democracy. They cannot use their role as a mechanism to wield power and promote privilege or protect privilege. That is not what this chamber is for. The 150 people elected to this chamber have a solemn duty to their electorates, and it's about democracy. Now, I've never seen the member for Mackellar sitting in the chair and being fair and impartial and bringing that. I think the Prime Minister said that the role should restore dignity. Well, I take offence at that because the 43rd Parliament had dignity. Just because you didn't act in a dignified way does not mean that the Parliament didn't have dignity. Now, when we unpack democracy, when we unpack democracy, we could look at what the members have done. Let's look at whether the member for Mackellar followed that great Liberal tradition of looking at the policy and crossing the floor. If she's prepared to be bipartisan. I've only seen two parliaments and I've only seen two people in this chamber cross the floor on a topic. Only two MPs. I think the member for McKillen did it about asylum seekers and he was rewarded by being totally overlooked. We had the member for Wentworth cross the floor about the ETS and he was rewarded by being placed on the cover of the Real Solutions brochure. I also went to the other place. And saw Senator Sue Boyce cross the floor the day after the member for Warringah was made leader, and she was rewarded by being overlooked and then booted out of Parliament. I know the member for New England has crossed the floor, and I look forward to seeing how he goes when it comes to voting on GrainCorp. I'm sure he will talk tough and walk soft. So let's look at how the member for Mackellar and the member for McEwen have treated democracy. And the best way to analyse is how they've voted on legislation that brings the votes to Australian people. Let's look after the election, the 2010 election review, where we tried to get 1.5 million people back on the electoral roll. Look at the report of the member for Mackellar, a dissenting report into that election, dissenting A dissenting report. Well, and then it has also been suggested, I'm sorry to say this, Member for McEwen, that perhaps you are not as, maybe we should support the member for McKellar for the sisterhood rather than the member for McEwen. You have a Y chromosome, she doesn't. So let's have a look. There is a saying that the head slave whips the hardest. Let's have a look at how the member for McKellar has treated the sisterhood when given the opportunity. When given the opportunity to stand out in front of a poster out front of this place saying, "Ditch the witch," to saying, "Julia, Bob Brown's bitch," what did she do? Did she apologise? Did she apologise for that? Never. Never apologised for that. And she actually said the people that had those signs were good, decent Australians. This is the fact. That's the fact. We're about to make a decision about the democracy in this place. I think very seriously about these decisions. So, obviously there is an important role, and it's good to have a bit of humour, and I have seen the member for McKellar in the last 6 years make 2 good jokes. She made a joke about the size of Julia Gillard's nose. Then she made a joke about the clothes that Julia Gillard wore. They were quite funny. But the humour of someone in the chair needs to have a touch of self-deprecation about it. I think the member for McKellar has deprecation down pat, but that is not the case. Now, the reality is we should choose the member for McEwen for the sake of democracy in this chamber.
We have a curious position in that Parliament has always been the body designed to protect our freedoms. It's always exercised restraint against an executive or government that wants more power. And what we're seeing in recent years across both governments, or the former government and the present government, is a willingness to pass laws that really are much more extreme than we need, and where you've got a collusion really of both major parties to allow the executive these increased powers, so that the role of Parliament in protecting freedoms is being diminished, and indeed also so too are the powers of the judiciary to review the decisions of ministers.
I have to say that I disagree with a lot of what Gillian had to say, because the first duty is to look after the people. We are answerable to the people at the ballot box, and it is a working and free democracy, the best in the world, in my view. And the fact that we have criticisms about the precautions that are being taken to ensure the safety of our people can be fair commentary, but sometimes it can overstep the mark too. And there is a time, and I think Gillian recognises it, when you're a statutory officer, you have to decide whether you are a statutory officer fulfilling that role with security of tenure, or whether you wish to say, I want to be part of the political debate and stand for office and run and become part of that political process. Gillian, if I can say, that report of yours was seen by many, including me, as one that was, if it was to be done, should have been done under the previous government when there were 2,000 children, but you chose to do it afterwards, and that made it very political. And it has made you a very political figure, and therefore you are subject to criticism. As I said before, you have to make the decision. Are you a statutory officer carrying out an obligation with the protection of that office, or do you wish to be a political participant? If you do wish to be a political participant, then you have to be no longer a statutory officer and perhaps stand for office.
Go ahead, Gillian Triggs. You need to answer
I
that.
am a statutory officer, and that's a position of independence which allows me to speak based on the evidence and based on the law as truthfully as I can to government and to the Australian people, and that is what I believe I have been doing. I've been meeting my statutory obligations. Indeed, were I to receive frequent praise and commendation from the government, I think the Australian people would have a good reason to ask for my resignation.
It's a very curious argument.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I wonder if I could just make one further point, and that is that throughout the years of the former government, we produced 180 different pieces of work, reports, mandatory detention centres, reports to the government. We had a special inquiry into the use of wrist x-rays to determine the age of children, and I went to Christmas Island and to various other detention centres. So I think it would be fair to say that we worked as strongly during the former government to protest against the holding of children for long periods of time as we did under the new government. Although our plan, of course, was to hold an inquiry in 2014, we weren't to know which government was going to win that election, and also that inquiry was, of course, backward-looking. It wasn't for the forward months. It was to examine what was the effect on the children of the period in which they were held in such large numbers and for such long periods of time. So perhaps I can finish, if I may, by saying that my position is not a political one. We work according to the law at the Australian Human Rights Commission, and we try to ensure that our evidence is accurate and well-founded. But unfortunately, of course, many of our findings and recommendations are interpreted in political ways, and I'm afraid in the human rights context it's very hard not to be perceived to be political, and that's really something we have to manage. But I can certainly assure the Australian people that the Human Rights Commission operates in a very neutral way, and we operate on the basis of the rule of law, which brings us, of course, back to the Magna Carta.
Speaker, I'm using this opportunity to ask you a question in your capacity as administration in this place. Rep's practice at page 146 states, members are entitled to expect that even though politically affiliated, the Speaker will carry out his or her duties impartially. Given the Prime Minister pointed out in question time your political comments on Q&A last night, was it appropriate for the Speaker to use her role in this place to go onto the media, to use it to comment on issues which may come before the Chair in the future?
I would refer. The questions that you are entitled under the standing orders to ask me as Speaker are questions relating to the administration. I doubt that that is a question that's so, but however, I will refer you to a different section of the practice, where it states quite plainly that in this system of Osminster, which we have here in Australia, that the Speaker remains politically affiliated and is impartial in the chair. Being impartial in the chair does not mean giving in to the noisiest lot. And any day that you look at this chamber, it's not hard to work out where the noise comes from. And indeed, when I was in opposition, I was as noisy as you were, and I got thrown out very often too. The job of opposition is to make life difficult for the government. We all know that. The job of the government is to explain its policies. And I am disappointed that, as a former Speaker, you asked a question in the terms that you did.
How many Liberal Party fundraisers has the Speaker held in the Speaker's dining room, and on what dates did these fundraisers occur?
I know the member for Watson was late into the Parliament at 9 o'clock this morning, and so he probably did not hear the statement that I read on that occasion, so I'll read it again. All members are entitled to use their suites for their own purposes, but of course not for illegal purposes. That is the answer to your question.
If I can refer to practice on page 179, where it states, for many purposes the Speaker is in effect the Minister for the Department of the House of Representatives, and jointly with the President of the Senate is Minister for the Department of Parliamentary Services. As you would appreciate, ministers are not able to hold political functions in departmental resources. I ask again, how many Liberal Party fundraisers has the Speaker held in the Speaker's dining room, and on what dates did these fundraisers occur?
I have said that members may use their suites for whatever purposes they see fit. That includes you. but they may not use it for an illegal purpose. Therefore, it is not the business of either executive government or others to ask members the purposes for which they use their offices. That is the rule.
How much has the Liberal Party paid on each occasion for the use of the Speaker's dining room for fundraisers, and has the ordinary $600 venue hire fee, which applies to all private dining rooms, been among the payments made?
I will not engage in debate on the question. I have made the ruling. I have said that members may use their offices for their own purposes.
Madam Speaker, I wish to raise a matter of privilege. In recent days, there have been reports that the Speaker has used her Parliament House dining room to hold Liberal Party fundraisers. There is a question as to whether the Speaker or the Liberal Party paid for the use of the Speaker's dining room for these party political functions. I ask the Speaker to investigate whether this constitutes an improper inference with the operations of the House of Representatives, such as to require that the matter be referred to the Privileges Committee for investigation and report.
I would simply say to the member for Watson he is perfectly at liberty under Standing Order 216 to write to the committee himself, and I'd recommend he do so.
Under practice, it indicates that I should first raise the issue with you in the House, which I have now done, and then there is an option for an individual to have ready a resolution to move immediately, which under practice does not require a seconder. Is that the path you wish me to choose?
I have said, under the Standing Orders 216, you are perfectly entitled, and I am following a ruling made by my predecessor, the member for Chisholm, and that is the ruling, so you no longer have the call.
Madam Speaker, I seek the call.
You can seek the call, but I recommend you do precisely as I said.
I seek the call.
You have the call.
I move that the following matter be referred to the Committee of Privileges and Members' Interests, whether the Speaker's use of her Parliament House dining room for Liberal Party fundraisers constitutes an improper interference with the operations of the House of Representatives. There are venues for hire all around the building. The Speaker's office is not one of them. When I first heard these allegations, I made the response that I believed your position would be untenable if it were true, because I could not believe, for all the arguments that I've had with the chair, that your office would become outsourced to the Liberal Party as a fundraising venue. For all the arguments we've had, it never occurred to me that partisanship would go to effectively donating a venue to the Liberal Party. Why is it that the Speaker is unwilling to let the Parliament know how many times her office has been given to free for fundraising objects within the Liberal Party? And I've got to say, there is a reason at the moment around Australia why attention has turned to Liberal Party fundraising methods. There is a reason all around Australia why we are starting to find out, and I'm glad the member for Dobell is still here in the chamber, while we are realising different methods that have been adopted by the Liberal Party in fundraising operations. To think that it goes to the office that is ostensibly the office that is meant to be independent within this parliament is extraordinary.
I find it a bit rough to be lectured on morality from you, the member for Watson. And I call the Honourable the Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, I would ask you to reconsider the statement that you made about
There's no point of order. The Leader of the House has the seat. I have sat here and accepted the words that were said about me. Now, the Leader of the House has the call.
You have questioned his morality. You questioned his morality, and you have engaged in debate.
Will resume her seat.
You just don't know how to behave, do you? Member for Rankin, member for Lingiari, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, just extraordinary. You have no manners at all.
The Leader of the House has the call. If this is meant to disrupt debate, then I'll accept the point of order.
Madam Speaker, I have a point of order on two grounds. One, you clearly intervened and participated in the debate. Secondly, you clearly reflected on a member of this House. Any member of us, any one of us would have been asked to withdraw and would have, and you should comply, Madam Speaker, with respect by the same rules that apply to every other member. Very
Except
clearly,
me,
you should withdraw that comment.
Except me, apparently. The Leader of the House has the call.
We will not be supporting this motion under any circumstances. The reasons that we will not be supporting this motion are that this is a motion about smear and innuendo directed at the Speaker's office. Smear and innuendo is the Labor Party's first weapon of choice.
The question is that the motion be put. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Is a division required? Yes. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Don't you dare compare me to Thompson. Don't you dare. Are we? We're having a campaign. Nothing but a campaign against the Speaker. It's been from day one. The result of the division...
Parliamentary Speaker Bronwyn Bishop is under fire this morning over her recent spending. Labor is demanding answers after she billed taxpayers $5,000 for a helicopter flight to a Liberal Party event.
7 News political reporter Tim Lester is live in Canberra for us. Tim, good morning to you. Did the Speaker break the rules? That's a big question.
Morning, guys. It is, and the Speaker's office certainly says that she has always travelled within guidelines, so their answer for a start is no, though there are a lot of questions left unanswered about this helicopter flight. Last November, we're talking about the time of the Victorian state election, $5,227 spent on chartering a helicopter to make the 80-kilometre journey from Melbourne to Clifton Springs Golf Course near Geelong, where there was a Liberal Party function going on. We're yet to hear in detail from the Speaker's office as to why she needed to take the chopper and not the slower but far more modest in terms of cost option of going on a Commonwealth car. This, as studies reveal or numbers reveal from parliamentary outlines of travel expenditure, that the Speaker spent $309,000 on her travel budget in her first full year as Speaker. Some Speakers spend six figures, but that is, in at least recent times, a record expenditure for a Speaker on her travel.
Speaker Bronwyn Bishop's travel expenses are under scrutiny over a European trip which cost taxpayers almost $90,000. Mrs Bishop led a parliamentary delegation to several countries, then went to Switzerland to lobby for a new job as president of an international parliamentary union. She lost out to the Bangladesh candidate. Mrs Bishop's ban on the burqa supposedly costing her the job.
In order to maintain the respect and the reputation of the Parliament, in order to preserve the integrity of the government and our institutions, it is very important that the Prime Minister act swiftly to require the Speaker to step aside, and it's very important that the Australian Federal Police quickly investigate these matters so that they can be resolved as soon as is humanly possible.
Will you be asking Bronwyn Bishop to step aside as Speaker?
No.
Why is this just an internal investigation? Why is Bronwyn Bishop being treated differently to Peter Slipper?
Well, no. Absolutely normal procedures are being followed here. Absolutely normal procedures are being followed here. The Department of Finance will have a look at it, and if they think there's anything else to do, well, that will be done.
A good idea for us to have a proper press conference so we can discuss the issues at hand. And I want to begin by saying, as a presiding officer, I have a charter allowance to allow me to reach my speaking engagements in the most cost-efficient way and time-efficient way, talking about the Parliament as I do, how it works, and hopefully letting the Australian people know more about the way our Parliament works. Now, since I have been Speaker, I have in fact used that charter allowance on 3 occasions. The one you know about is the helicopter. There were 2 other charters I used of small fixed-wing aircraft. When I first saw the amount that the helicopter cost was after it was published by Finance, as it should be. All these figures are always published. And the bookings were simply made in the ordinary course of events by my office. And when I saw the figure as it was published, it was clearly an error of judgment. And that large sum, clearly unacceptable, and that's why I'm repaid it.
But you say it's an error of judgment. Can you apologise to the Australian people who are watching you now?
Well, I think the biggest apology one can make is to repay the money.
How is it official government business if you're turning up at a Liberal Party fundraiser?
The fact of the matter is I'm the guest speaker and I'm speaking about the Parliament and how it works, and that's what I do.
Will you resign?
No, I won't.
It's an hour by road to go from Geelong to Melbourne, a journey that many people would do every day, including motorists. Why did you take a helicopter?
Because, as I said, that was the way it had been organised for me. And as I told you...
But do you feel you're under the heat now?
Oh, not particularly.
Say it's an error of judgment. Why not an apology?
I said that yesterday, and I said the best form of apology is to repay the money, and that's
well,
what
the
I'm
best
doing.
form of apology, Mrs Bishop, is to say, I'm sorry.
Is it appropriate to use that money for fundraisers, Ms Bishop?
I didn't use it for fundraising.
You're going to a fundraiser, weren't you?
I was the guest speaker, and I find it absolutely unconscionable to think that you would think that there are certain people in the Australian community that you're not prepared, they're not entitled to hear from members of Parliament.
I don't think that's an argument, Mrs Bishop.
I think it's a very strong argument.
The grandiosity of the
I agree with that. The grandiosity is quite right, and that's why I've repaid the money. Thank you very much, everybody.
Will you be paying...
Bronwyn has admitted that this was an error of judgment, a serious error of judgment. She's repaid the money with a significant penalty. The matter is now being looked at by the Department of Finance, as is appropriate in these sorts of matters. I can really understand why people are unhappy about this. Frankly, I'm unhappy about it as well. Bronwyn has admitted that this was an error of judgment, a serious error of judgment. She's repaid the money with a significant penalty. The matter is now being looked at by the Department of Finance, as is appropriate in these sorts of matters. I can really understand why people are unhappy about this. Frankly, I'm unhappy about it as well.
The helicopter was just ridiculous, and I'm so sorry that I didn't apologise earlier. And with regard to weddings, I'll be repaying any of those costs associated with colleagues' weddings. And I've asked the Prime Minister to ask the Department of Finance to look at my expenditure. So I can say again this morning that I am so apologetic to the Australian people for letting them down, and I will be working very hard to make sure that things are right.
Will you resign from your position?
No, I won't resign from the position, but I will be working very hard.
What's your response to the no confidence motion that will be brought by Clive Palmer and Andrew Wilkie?
Well, it's their entitlement. They're entitled to do that.
If you believe you did nothing wrong by charging to go to the weddings, why have you then repaid the money?
The charter was to go to a function in Geelong because it was too much money. It just looked wrong. And although, on all these things, although it's within the rules, it just doesn't look right. And therefore, I'm apologising and I'm repaying them.
Why has it taken 3 weeks, though, to apologise?
I wish it hadn't. I wished I'd done it earlier.
Do you think you're out of touch with the general Australian public?
Pardon me?
Do you think you're out of touch with the broader Australian public?
If I have been, I hope I will not be, and it's important for me to talk with the Australian people. I love this country very much, and it does sadden me that I feel I've let them down.
Were you asked by the Prime Minister to apologise, or is this something?
No, I wasn't. It was my decision.
Why did you pick today to apologise?
Because I felt it was the right thing to do.
Is this a genuine apology, or is it just trying to save the job, though?
This is a genuine apology.
Did the Prime Minister direct you at any time to repay the money?
No.
2 weeks ago at your news conference, you elected not to say sorry. Why didn't you say sorry?
What a good question. I wish I had.
You do? So you regret that?
I do.
Do you regret anything else that you said in that news conference?
Look, I have listened to the Australian people, and I regret that I feel I've let them down, and I am truly sorry for that.
The Bronwyn Bishop helicopter flight, she said that she acted within the rules, although everyone from you down has agreed that it was inappropriate.
An error of judgment.
An error of judgment. Do